Welcome to AI for Lawyers.
Hey, everybody. Welcome into an all-new episode of AI for Lawyers with attorney Samar, Shah, and Lawrence Liu. I am your host, Mike Leon. Through secondopinion.law, Samar and Lawrence have been helping law firm leaders choose and implement AI tools that are actually worth using, not just worth talking about. Today's episode, we're going to be breaking down how to evaluate AI vendors, spot red flags, and decide what truly belongs in your firm's tech stack. It's so funny that we're talking about this. I was just mentioning off air to these guys about vetting third-party vendors, and here we are getting set to talk about this. So Samar, let's dive into this. It's good to see you guys as always. So a firm is starting to explore AI tools, which ones they should use, shouldn't use. How should it identify the specific problem that they are looking to solve?
Yeah, Mike, first of all, thanks for having me. This is a great question. And before I answer that, let me tell you how I think lawyers are actually doing this, and I'll tell you maybe how they should be doing this. A lot of attorneys, I'm an attorney, we all are, have to deal with the shiny object syndrome, right? So, like, there is something new, I want to check it out. I love technology, I love the law. Let me find something at the intersection of these two things. Let me just see what's out there and implement it into my practice and see how it goes, right? So, they're often chasing the shiny object. The other thing attorneys are doing today is they're just overworked. Attorneys are always overworked, right? You hear all these stories about how attorneys are working long hours, and they're like, I need something to help me with my overload, right? I need some sanity back into my life. I'm just going to dive right into this AI tool and see if it makes my life better. Both of which I think are terrible approaches to how to pick a tool. We just talked about it in our last episode, how there are all sorts of ethical and legal pitfalls and problems around AI. So you can't just jump into it. You can't let shiny objects drive your decision-making process or your desperation for efficiency drive this process. There have been so many firms that have been burned by this in many different ways, legal sanctions being one of them. But the other one is low adoption rates, right? There are some legal software providers who do a great job of getting a contract with a law firm or a company and then find out nobody at the firm is using the AI tool, right? Like, people checked it out for a week or two and then it's crickets, right? You hear those stories all the time. And it's because firms haven't taught their attorneys how to use it, haven't vetted the vendors sufficiently. And if attorneys have a bad experience, they're not going to come back to it, right? They're already overworked as it is. So I think you shouldn't be doing those two things to drive the decision making process. I think the best way to do this is to say, hey, where do we have the most amount of work, or where is the most amount of kind of non-strategic work happening at my firm? And then see if you can find a specific tool to help you tackle that problem, right? Just because one AI tool is great for litigation and discovery doesn't mean it's going to be great for your problem, which may be just reviewing NDAs, right? So find a tool that's going to be really good at reviewing and triaging NDAs first, and then go from there. To me, that's a much more viable pathway to long-term adoption and safe adoption of software, AI software in the legal space.
Yeah, I love it. It's a great approach to it. And staying with that, Lawrence, I want to turn to you because Samar said something there that I think is very important, vetting the vendors. So, what basic screening questions should every firm, according to Lawrence, have before agreeing to a trial? What should they be asking?
Yeah, I would say, are you a wrapper or you build your own model? So if you're a wrapper, then are you using OpenAI or Anthropics or what have you? And then if you're building your own model, what is the parameters around that? How much data did you train? How much memory did you use? And what model, right? Those are important things because a lot of time, a lot of company claim that they're training their model, but it's very simple model that doesn't really work that well. Then the open source or the public AI should be just fine. It should work, right? So those are the things that they need to look at. And then also, I mean, for a lot of these applications for law firms, they might just use something simple first, start out simple, and then getting into the next step and the next step instead of just going all out. Because when you go all out, it just overwhelms a lot of people inside the firm. So it's very hard for them to comprehend. So just start small step, just go from there. And then the other one I want to emphasize on is like AI today. Every model is different, so you want to have different model to try it out. So different vendor might solve the same problem. So you want to try out multiple vendors to see which one is best. Sometimes you might want to use both of them to verify, to check each other out. So
Yeah.
that's what we build also. We build systems that have using multiple AI to check each other out and to make sure we have the best option and the best answer for our customers. So that's something that everybody should try out. It's not only even not only one but multiple ones. Even when I use OpenAI, I also use Anthropic and Gemini to see what the answers are.
Yeah. You test drive multiple cars, right? You don't take the first one, or you shouldn't, as my wife says.
Exactly.
So Samar, let me ask you, because you just mentioned about picking one for your specific action, right? If you want one that can help you with NDAs versus something else. So kind of staying with that, what's the difference for people out there to understand about a general productivity tool that's using AI versus one that's genuinely built for the legal work that they're looking for?
Yeah, and here my answer is maybe gonna be surprising to some attorneys listening. You know, all the legal AI tool vendors say, "Oh, we're better than generic AI," because we have our own LLMs, like Lawrence mentioned, or because we do X, Y, and Z, we hallucinate less. But the reality is, there's this 2024 Stanford benchmarking study, and they found that generic AI tools were better than legal specific AI tools. And it makes sense, right? I mean, ChatGPT, Anthropic, all these companies are spending billions, maybe trillions of dollars on building their models. No legal tech company is going to be able to compete with that, right? So you got to be really careful and evaluate these claims. That same Stanford study found that legal specific AI tools were hallucinating 33% of times. And a lot of the generic AI tools were hallucinating the same amount of time. So it almost didn't matter. And that's why we built Second Opinion, right? That was the insight that Lawrence and I started with. And we said, we were thinking about, hey, how can we build a better, more efficient model for AI in the legal space? And what the conclusion that we came to is that it's not possible, right? Like these AI tools, large language model providers are going to give you the best output possible. And nobody is going to be able to beat that because they serve a wider consumer market, right? And legal markets just never going to be as big as the broader consumer markets. So, we said, well, if nobody can beat these things and these things still suck, right? Because they hallucinate all the time. What can you do? And the solution that we converged upon is that, hey, we should use all of them, right? And we should be using each one to pit against the other one and help you identify and weed out hallucinations and errors and things like that. And there's no better way to do it than to use these generic AI tools to help you find those out and surface those. So that's kind of the thought process behind Second Opinion Law. That's what we have done. But yeah, it's a interesting benchmark finding that we built our company around, is that generic AI tools are often just as good, and the legal specific AI tools are worse often than generic tools. The two things that you do get with legal specific AI tools is you get better privacy protection, you get better confidentiality agreements, right? Because like for example, we Second Opinion Law have specific contracts with OpenAI and other model providers to keep information confidential. We have an audit trail ability, so that those kinds of things are important to attorneys. I think legal tech AI tools do a good job of that, but in terms of model performance, they're often worse than the generic AI tools.
Let me add to that. We also use a very advanced database that allow us to store data in a specific way and retrieve it in a specific way. So we use a graph database where we allow AI to ask questions in very specific ways, and we can enable us to reproduce the result. So that's something that's very different. Whereas typical AI today, they use a vector database. It's about semantics, so it's very hard to reproduce the same answer. So it's much better if we use a graph database and advanced graph database algorithms that allow us to find the right answer and generate the same answer next time.
Lawrence, let me ask you. We were talking about evaluating vendors earlier, but what also, besides the checklist of questions that they should be asking first, like what would you advise them to look for in the data security and confidentiality practices?
Yeah, I think on that front, SOC 2, various PII, and other zero data retention, those are the tools that should be used by the vendor. And also talk to the vendors on how they protect different customers, different clients. So those are the things that at minimum that should be available. And then do they anonymize their data to when they send it to the LLM? So that's what we're trying to do is anonymize or obscure or filter out the data before we send it. So even though that data might be leaked, but the name or the values or the numbers or the dollars won't be available to the outside. So those are the things that companies should do to protect their customers.
Samar, in a previous episode, we were talking about, the kind of manual oversight, right, with respect to this. So for the firm that's listening out there, what's a realistic process you would recommend for not only testing a new AI tool out, but also making sure it doesn't kind of disrupt their daily workflow already?
Yeah, that is a great question. Um, there have been at least two very public cases around this. There is one very large law firm that launched a AI-based innovations hub. I won't name the law firm here, but they built this AI innovation hub that would allow their clients and other attorneys to use AI and help them process legal documents for startups and things like that. And after 2 years of offering this product, they said only 5% of the firms had accessed the actual materials that were generated and in this database. The firms, a lot of startups who were using it never downloaded any of the resources or the training material or the templates or anything like that. So they just said they spent millions of dollars building this out. They said, okay, it is available. People sign on. Some of it is free and 5% usage, right? They had to eventually shut that down. There is another example in England. Alan A&O Sherman is kind of the firm that has sterling reputation or did this the right way. What they did is they said, hey, we have this one very specific subset of documents, right? Contract review related to NDAs. We do a lot of these. We spend X amount of hours triaging these and managing signatures and things like that. And they said, okay, we're going to build a team that is responsible for handling these contracts. And we're going to train up this team to make sure they understand how to use these AI tools and how to audit the AI tools and how to check and verify what's being put into these documents. And they have a huge success rate, right? There's kind of the industry gold standard in terms of how to implement AI into the practice successfully. And the way it happens is by being very intentional, right? The first firm, they just threw a bunch of money at it, said, go at it, have fun, right? Very little implementation or uptake as far as the resources go. And then another firm that said, hey, we're going to focus on this one very specific area of law with this one specific team. We're going to train them, we're going to audit them, we're going to validate it. And they have had huge success with it. So that's one thing that I would tell all attorneys listening is like, find that one thing that's a big problem for you, right? The low hanging fruit, build a team around it, build training around it, and then deploy it. You're gonna be surprised how effective these AI tools are when they're used correctly. Because if you don't, you may have 1 month of usage spike, and then nobody's gonna use it. And that's what my conversations with a lot of attorneys are. They're like, yeah, I checked out this tool about a year ago. It was more work than it was beneficial, so I just stopped using it. Yeah, that's how it goes.
Right. That's normally how it goes in all walks of life. Gents, as we wrap here, Lawrence, I'll turn to you first, and Samar, you could piggyback if you want. So leadership now has signed off on using a new AI tool. What's one checkpoint you would advise them to make sure is not skipped before they actually launch and integrate this tool?
I would say start small and roll out to a small tiger team with maybe 10 to 20 people first, and then have them test it out and have some wins, small wins, that allowed them to showcase to the entire company, and then also test their AI tool against existing or previous results, run it through, let's say, last year or the year before document, and see how AI compared to the actual document that was generated by attorneys, and see what the accuracy percentage is. Those are the things that they can take steps and make sure the process is precise and systematic, that enable them to see the result at the end. So set a precise schedule also, let's say 6 months or 8 months or what have you, and then make sure at the end you have results from it. So don't just put it out and hoping it will work.
Samar, is there anything?
Yeah, from a legal perspective, I would say that make sure you have a mandatory verification protocol for your attorneys. Every fact, every piece of law that's in these documents generated by AI needs to have human eyeballs on it and be verified by a human and have some kind of a checkoff process for it. Otherwise, you are at risk. The other thing, I talked about this in episode 1 in more detail, but having some baseline metrics is really important. A lot of AI tools, they shorten the initial time to draft, but they balloon your review responsibility, right? So like you end up saving no time in the end, right? Because you're just shortening you're squeezing one part of the balloon only for the other part of the balloon to expand. So I would say have a baseline metric of how you're doing per hour with different things before AI and then post AI. You don't want to be in a situation where you're just squeezing the balloon at different places, but it gets you nowhere, right? But now your costs have ballooned, right? Because now you're paying thousands of dollars to an AI vendor for no real savings. So I would have those two things in place to really kind of get a sense of, hey, are we benefiting from this? And then 2, make sure this AI is not hurting you as well.
It's great advice, gentlemen. As always, we appreciate it. Lawrence, Samar, I can't thank you guys enough.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
And thank you to everyone out there for listening to this installment of AI for Lawyers. If you want to get Samar and Lawrence's evaluation checklist and that vendor risk template, do me a favor right now, visit secondopinion.law. Thanks again for listening. But before you go, do me a favor, hit like, hit subscribe, share the episode with someone who needs to hear it. As always, I'm Mike Leon. We will see everybody next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.